This is her last project here. That was the sentence that cut through the reception hall, sharper than any toast or announcement. Drew Halden, the CEO's son, said it directly to the woman standing beside him, Adriana Steele, the chief executive of Aurelius Defense. His tone was smooth, confident, and completely certain, as if he were handing down a verdict rather than speaking about a person standing only a few feet away. I felt my name vanish from my own body. I was Lily Winslow, senior security lead at Stratadine Systems. But in that moment, I was just the silent figure everyone was suddenly staring at. Forks paused. Conversations died mid-sentence. Adriana's eyes settled on me, steady and unreadable, like she was measuring something I did not know I was offering. I managed to stand still. Drew didn't look at me. Not once. He turned away as if the matter were closed, as if I had already disappeared. Someone beside me whispered my name, but I couldn't answer. I kept replaying his voice, those 6 words, trying to understand how he could strip 8 years of work from me in less time than it takes to lift a glass. I told myself to breathe, to finish the evening without falling apart, to survive the humiliation without showing it on my face. I made it through the presentations, through the polite applause, through the forced smiles and the people who avoided eye contact with me. Hours passed, though I barely felt them. The crowd thinned. The reception staff began collecting empty glasses and folded napkins. I kept near a corner, waiting until it was safe to leave without drawing more attention. That was when I saw Adriana Steele walking toward me. No assistants, no entourage, just her. She stopped in front of me and spoke quietly, like this was a continuation of a conversation we had not started yet. "We need to talk." Her voice carried none of the coldness Drew had shown earlier. It was something else entirely, something I could not name. I followed her toward the exit, unsure what waited outside. Adriana did not speak until the doors shut behind us. Her heels clicked once on the pavement before she turned to me. "Start from the beginning. Ms. Winslow," she said. "Why did he announce your removal tonight?" Her voice was calm, but there was nothing casual in it. I expected irritation, maybe even blame. What I did not expect was precision. Each word placed like she was disassembling a device to see how it worked. "I honestly don't know why he chose tonight," I said, but the decision wasn't sudden. Adriana studied my expression, not reacting. "It started months ago," I added quietly. "Drew has pushed me out of key meetings. He's rewritten parts of my reports without telling me. Tonight was just the public version of something that began long before this event." A vibration buzzed in my hand. I glanced at my phone. A message from Colette. One of my analysts appeared on the screen. "They planned this. I'm sorry." My stomach tightened, but I locked the phone before Adriana could read anything on my face. She stepped a little closer. "What exactly has he been rewriting?" "My vulnerability assessments," I said. He wanted the quarterly review to look cleaner. I would not sign off on it. After that, things changed. Changed how he began sidelining me, assigning my responsibilities to people who had never touched defense-grade systems. When I pushed back, he implied I was being dramatic. My voice wavered, and I hated that it did. Adriana noticed. Who else knew she asked? No one who could risk saying anything. I answered, "Most of them have families. I have a father with medical bills and a mortgage that eats most of my paycheck. I could not drag anyone else into my problems." Adriana folded her arms. Thoughtful. "You chose to keep your integrity, even if it cost you security. That is the only thing I had control over." She nodded slowly, as if something she had been waiting for finally settled into place. "Good," she said. "Now tell me what Drew was trying so hard to hide." "It started right after Drew's promotion," I said. One week he was a strategy consultant with no clearance, and the next he was in charge of every review I submitted. Adriana's expression barely shifted, but her attention sharpened. "He called me into his office the first day," I continued. "He smiled the whole time, like we were partners on the same mission. Then he told me my vulnerability reports sounded too dramatic and needed to be toned down for the board. What did he mean by that? Adriana asked. He wanted me to remove entire sections. Actual risks. He said our clients preferred confidence, not noise. When I reminded him that defense systems do not care about confidence, he told me I needed to adapt to the new culture. Adriana's jaw tightened. A breath caught in my throat as I remembered the shift that followed. Then, the meeting invitations stopped. At first, I thought they were oversights. But it kept happening. Strategy briefings, integration sessions, even client calls I had led for years. And no one questioned your absence, she asked. I had people asking me later why I didn't show up. I said, they assumed I knew, but the messages never arrived. The invites never hit my calendar. Adriana angled her head, studying me more deeply now, and the memo she prompted. I felt heat rise under my skin. A company-wide announcement went out in early March. It said leadership had identified resistance to cultural modernization in certain departments. It never named me, but everyone knew who they meant. After that, people avoided defending me. They were afraid to be associated. Adriana exhaled slowly. So this was deliberate. It was a push-out, I said, a slow one, designed to look like I was the problem. For the first time since she brought me outside, something in her expression softened just slightly, but enough to tell me she believed every word. Still, she kept whatever she was really thinking locked behind her eyes. She glanced back toward the glowing windows of the reception hall. Then it is time I tell you why I asked you to walk out here with me. I took a steady breath. The turning point was the audit in early spring. Stratadine needed a clean report for the upcoming defense renewal. Drew called me into his office 2 days before the submission. Adriana waited, her eyes fixed on me. He told me the board was nervous. I said. He said a few red flags would create unnecessary noise. His exact words were that we needed to avoid scaring them. What did he want you to change? She asked. He wanted an entire vulnerability chain removed. I said. It was serious. It affected encryption layers tied directly to defense-grade communications. If we hid that, we would be lying to the government. I told him I would not do it. And his response. He leaned back in his chair like I was a child having a tantrum. He told me I needed to show I could be a team player. He said people with rigid principles never survived long in leadership. I felt my throat tighten. That night, I went back to check the system logs for the audit package. My access was blocked. I thought it was a glitch, so I called the administrator. She told me my permissions had been adjusted per leadership request weeks earlier. Adriana's expression sharpened. Weeks earlier. Yes, I said, before I ever refused anything. He had already started preparing to replace me. He just needed a reason that looked clean. Adriana was silent for a long moment. Too long. She was thinking, calculating. Something in my story connected with something she already knew. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower than before. Integrity is expensive in this industry. Few can afford it. I stared at her, unsure whether she meant it as a compliment or a warning. But she held the thought like it was a truth she had lived with far too long. Then she looked toward the emptying parking lot and said quietly, "There is a great deal more you need to understand about Stratadine." Adriana clasped her hands behind her back, as if preparing to open a door she had kept closed all evening. "I did not bring you outside to discuss humiliation," she said. "I brought you outside because I have been reviewing your work for months." I felt a jolt in my chest. "My work?" She nodded once. "I chair the National Cybersecurity Standards Council. We are preparing a transparency initiative that will affect every defense contractor in the country. That is significant." I managed. "It is overdue," she replied. "Too many firms hide their risks. Too many executives alter reports to protect profit margins. We have been evaluating senior leadership across several companies. Stratadine was flagged early. The statement landed like a blow. Flagged for what irregularities? She said. Trends that suggested someone was manipulating vulnerability data. Before tonight, I already suspected internal interference. When I watched Drew Halden publicly dismiss you, the pieces aligned. My pulse hammered. She had not just witnessed the collapse, she had been tracking the cracks long before they showed. Adriana continued, "We are forming a specialized, independent group to design the new transparency standards. I want you to help lead it." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. "You want me to develop the protocols?" "Yes. Your record shows a consistent refusal to bend your assessments. That is exactly the kind of foundation we need." Footsteps approached behind us. Drew Halden's voice slid into the air. "Is there a problem here?" Adriana did not even turn toward him. "No problem. I am offering Ms. Winslow a strategic role in our national initiative." She allowed a thin pause. "If she accepts, Stratadine will be required to adopt her protocols." The blood drained from Drew's face so quickly it was almost visible in the dim light. His mouth opened, then closed, as if searching for an argument he could not form. I stood between them, his panic vibrating through the silence, her authority pressing forward with calm certainty. Adriana finally looked at me fully. "The decision is yours, Ms. Winslow." The fallout began before sunrise. My phone lit up with a string of emails from Stratadine's human resources team, cold, rehearsed paragraphs about reputational impact, internal disruption, and concerns raised by senior leadership. None of them mentioned Drew by name, but every line carried his fingerprints. By mid-morning, a notice went out to the entire company that an unexpected personnel transition had occurred. I read it twice. They had erased what really happened and implied I had caused the disturbance at the reception. I called the HR director directly. "I deserve a clear explanation," I said. Her voice was rigid. "This matter is under board review. Ms. Winslow, you will be contacted when a decision has been finalized. Did Drew write that statement? I cannot comment on internal communications." Then the line went dead. Drew, however, was not silent. He sent a short message from his personal number. "Whatever conversation you had last night changes nothing. Back off." It was the closest he had ever come to sounding afraid. By evening, 2 members of my old team reached out quietly. One whispered that the board had met twice and that Drew had spent the morning trying to convince them I had undermined leadership. Another warned me that he had already started shifting blame toward my department. Just after 10, a knock sounded at my apartment door. No one was there, only a plain envelope on the floor. Inside were printed emails threads between Drew and his father, the CEO. They discussed altering vulnerability reports, removing risk indicators, and managing client perceptions. Every doubt I ever had snapped into certainty. This was the proof Stratadine had buried for nearly a year. I sat at my kitchen table, holding the pages with shaking fingers. Adriana had given me a path to expose all of this, but taking it would ignite a fire that could swallow people who had nothing to do with Drew's corruption. Good engineers, analysts, people I had trained and trusted. The envelope lay open in front of me, daring me to choose what came next. I met Adriana the next afternoon in a quiet conference room at her temporary office in Colorado Springs. She stood as I entered, studying my face before saying anything. "Have you made your decision, Ms. Winslow?" "I have," I said. "I will accept the role under one condition." Her brows lifted slightly. "Name it." "The new standards must include protections for whistleblowers, real ones. And the protocols need safeguards for employees who followed orders they were not in a position to question. The people under Drew should not be punished for his decisions." Adriana considered my words carefully. "You want transparency without collateral damage. I want a system where the right people are held accountable," I said, "not the ones who kept the lights on while leadership cut corners." After a long pause, she nodded. "Agreed. I will ensure those clauses are included." A weight settled off my chest. It was not victory, just the permission to move forward without betraying the people who mattered. I reached into my bag and set the envelope of internal Stratadine emails on the table. This came to my door last night. Someone wanted me to see the truth. Adriana opened the packet and scanned the first page. "Do you know who sent it? I do now," I said. "An engineer named Marcus Ellery. Drew sidelined him last year after Marcus refused to sign off on a rushed deployment. I defended him then. I guess he remembered." Adriana closed the packet with deliberate care. "Then you are not as alone in this as you believe." By the end of the week, I was immersed in drafting the first version of the transparency framework. It felt like building a bridge in the middle of a storm, steady work against unpredictable gusts. Then, the storm shifted. A headline appeared online: "Late Friday night senior Stratadine employee removed over performance concerns." Internal sources claim. It was a smear, unmistakably crafted to discredit me before the standards could gain traction. Drew had chosen his battlefield, and now I had to decide how to meet him on it. The ballroom in Denver was filled long before my session began. I spotted Drew and his father immediately front row, centered, their expressions tight with anticipation. They expected a spectacle, something they could twist into proof that I was unstable or unprofessional. Adriana stood beside me backstage for a brief moment. "Present the work. Nothing more. Nothing less," she said. "The truth will do the rest." I walked onto the stage to steady applause. My pulse thudded, but my voice stayed level. "Over the past several months," I began, "our team has analyzed vulnerability reporting practices across more than 100 defense contractors. What we found reveals a pattern far more alarming than isolated mistakes." I tapped the remote. A series of charts appeared clean, simple, undeniable. "Some companies," I continued, "altered vulnerability chains before submission. Others removed high-risk indicators to preserve their internal metrics, and a few suppressed entire reports, delaying disclosure for weeks or months." A murmur rippled through the audience. I did not look at Drew, but I could feel his stare. "These patterns," I said, "compromise national security. They allow weaknesses to persist in critical systems, and they put lives at risk." Our new transparency framework requires standardized reporting, independent verification, and immediate disclosure protocols. The next slide displayed anonymized case studies companies labeled only as Contractor 1, Contractor 2, Contractor 3. The shapes of the data were unmistakable. Stratadine's footprint sat right there on the screen without ever being named. Drew's father sat rigid. Drew's jaw locked so tightly I could see the strain from the stage. I moved to the final slide. To rebuild trust, these standards must apply across the entire sector. Before I could continue, a government representative stepped to the microphone. "The department has reviewed the preliminary framework," she said, "effective immediately. All defense contractors will be required to comply." The room erupted shock, whispers, protests. Drew slumped back in his seat, the reality settling on him like a weight he could not lift. He could no longer hide what he had buried for so long. I lowered the remote and let the noise wash over me. The truth was no longer a secret he could control. The fallout from the summit hit Stratadine faster than anyone expected. By the next morning, investigative requests flooded the company's servers. Federal auditors demanded full access to archived reports. Aurelius Defense Stratadyne's second-largest client announced that all contracts would be frozen until an external review confirmed compliance with the new standards. I heard all of it secondhand calls from former teammates, hurried messages from people who once avoided saying my name in public. The silence inside the company had cracked open. Late that afternoon, Marcus Ellery walked into a scheduled meeting with federal auditors. He carried a folder identical to the anonymous one he had left at my door. When they asked if he understood the risks of stepping forward, he said, "I do, and the new protections make it possible." His voice didn't shake. Mine did when I heard what he had done. Within hours, Stratadine announced that Drew had been suspended pending investigation. The phrasing was empty, but the meaning was not. His father, The CEO tried to hold the line, insisting everything was a misunderstanding. That defense lasted less than a day. The auditors uncovered concealed failures in 2 major deployments. Failures Drew had rerouted to junior staff so they would not appear on his record. They found altered timestamps, missing attachments, and chains of approval that ended abruptly where his edits began. When the board confronted him, he blamed everyone within reach: engineers, managers, contractors. Not once did he deny the altered reports. He only denied responsibility for them. By evening, the board announced its intention to remove the CEO as well, citing leadership failures and breach of fiduciary duty. I sat in my temporary office, listening as the news spread across the industry. I felt no triumph, no thrill of revenge. Everything that was collapsing inside Stratadine was collapsing because it had been built on a lie. And lies never hold once the truth is allowed to breathe. I had not destroyed anything. The truth had done the work on its own. The official announcement arrived early on a Monday morning. Stratadine's board released a statement declaring that Drew Halden had been terminated for cause and barred from holding any position connected to defense contracting. The decision was permanent, with no appeal. Half an hour later, his father submitted his resignation, citing leadership fatigue, though everyone knew the truth. Sanctions followed, and industry groups moved quickly to blacklist both of them. I closed the article on my screen just as Adriana stepped into my new office. "You handled the last few weeks with remarkable restraint," she said. "I did what needed to be done." I replied. She studied me, her expression softer than I had ever seen it. "Do you regret not going after them harder?" "No," I said. "Revenge burns hot and fast. But changing the landscape so people like him can never thrive again, that lasts." Adriana smiled. "Then you have built something far greater than retribution." The desk behind me was stacked with early drafts of the national transparency standards. Over the past month, contractors across the country began adopting the framework. Some did it quietly, others held press briefings. The shift was real slow, but undeniable. I pulled a single folder from a drawer, the one labeled Origin Point. Inside was the printed agenda from the night Drew tried to erase me with 6 careless words. I kept it not out of bitterness, but because it reminded me of where everything truly started. Adriana tapped the folder. "You know," she said, "stories like yours matter. They show people that accountability can win if someone is willing to stand their ground." Before she left, she added, "When this framework goes public next month, people will want to hear the whole story. Make sure you tell it." I nodded, knowing she was right. To everyone watching, if you want more stories where truth cuts through power, like the video, subscribe, and stay with me. There is more to tell. Sometimes the moment meant to destroy you is simply the door to the life you were supposed to build, and walking through it makes all the difference.